Hello everyone! It's such a pleasure to see you back on my channel. Today, I want to share with you a deeply touching story about a single mother, Gwyn. Gwyn was an orphan from a very young age. She was taken in and raised by her kind-hearted grandmother. But that brief moment of peace didn't last long. Her grandmother fell seriously ill and had to sell everything of value in the house for treatment. And when her grandmother passed away, Gwyn lost the only support she had in this world: no home, no family, and nowhere to return to. All alone, Gwyn wandered from place to place. One day, in her misfortune, she was assaulted by a cruel man and became pregnant. Though devastated and desperate, she chose to keep the baby, the only thing left that tied her to life. From that moment on, mother and child relied on each other, roaming the streets, collecting scrap and recyclables, even venturing deep into the forest to pick bamboo shoots and wild vegetables to sell for a few coins. Life was unbearably harsh. Gwyn often barely had enough to eat. Because of malnutrition, she no longer had milk to feed her baby. Yet, despite her frail body, she pushed herself to work tirelessly, only wishing to earn enough for a single can of milk, so her baby wouldn't cry from hunger. This is the tearful yet heartwarming journey of a young mother, a story you will never forget. Today, like any other day, Gwyn carried her frail and pale baby in her arms and ventured deep into the old forest to gather bamboo shoots and wild vegetables, hoping to trade them for a few coins to buy milk. Hunger gnawed at both mother and child for days, making every step heavier than the last. But in Gwyn's heart, there was only one thought: as long as my baby is full, I can endure anything. She followed the winding forest paths, picking tender bamboo shoots, while gathering edible wild greens known by the locals. Hunger twisted her stomach painfully, forcing her to pluck a handful of wild vegetables, rinse them in the stream, and eat them on the spot, just enough to keep herself going. Just when it seemed like she would have to return empty-handed, Gwyn's eyes suddenly lit up. She spotted clusters of rare lingji mushrooms growing beneath an ancient tree. A surge of joy rushed through her veins, washing away her exhaustion. If she could collect these mushrooms and sell them, she would have enough money to buy milk and even some rice, enough for her and her baby to survive the coming days. Carefully placing each mushroom into her basket, Gwyn continued gathering bamboo shoots and wild greens. When she had collected enough, she turned back, mentally calculating how much her haul might be worth. But as she stepped out of the forest path, the scorching sun and her days of hunger overwhelmed her. Her vision blurred. She staggered and collapsed onto the narrow dirt trail. The baby in her arms burst into a desperate cry, the sound echoing through the silent forest like a plea for help. The child was weak from hunger too, its tiny stomach empty after days of surviving only on sips of water. In that moment, all that remained in the deep forest was the pitiful wailing of a starving child and the sight of a mother lying unconscious, still holding her baby tightly in her arms. Meanwhile, deep in a remote forest far from any residential area, a forest ranger named Sun was on his routine patrol. Recently, illegal logging activities had become increasingly rampant, with loggers brazenly cutting down precious timber. As Sun walked, his brow furrowed in concern. He radioed his colleagues at the ranger station, requesting additional forces to inspect and record the trees that showed signs of being illegally marked. Venturing deeper into the forest, he discovered a massive tree that had been partially cut down, while several other trees nearby were marked with red paint, a familiar sign left by loggers before they returned to finish their work. Gritting his teeth, Sun tightened his grip on his radio, ready to report back to the station. But just then, a faint sound broke through the eerie silence, the cry of a child. Startled, Sun froze. In such a remote area, far removed from any village, how could there possibly be a child? His instincts sharpened. He moved cautiously, step by step, following the sound. The crying grew clearer, mingling with the rustling wind that whispered through the forest canopy, sending a chilling shiver down his spine. Then he stopped dead in his tracks. The sight before him gripped his heart. There, lying motionless on the muddy ground, was a young woman in tattered clothes. Her face was pale, lips cracked from exhaustion. Beside her, a baby, only a few months old, wailed hoarsely, its tiny hands patting weakly at its mother as if trying to wake her up. Without hesitation, Son rushed over. Kneeling down, he gently shook the woman. "Miss, can you hear me?" No response. He glanced at the trembling baby, its cries filled with hunger and fear, and felt his chest tighten. Son knew that if he delayed even a moment longer, both mother and child might not survive. Son quickly began administering first aid to Gwyn. He used clean water to wash her face, gently patting her cheeks and calling out anxiously, "Miss, please stay with me." After a few moments, Gwyn's eyes fluttered open, filled with exhaustion and confusion. Relieved, Son let out a deep breath. But before he could feel any joy, the weak cries of the baby beside them pierced the air, tugging painfully at his heart. "Can you tell me where your home is?" "I'll take you and your baby there," Son asked, his voice both patient and urgent. Gwyn weakly shook her head, her lips trembling. I don't have a home, no one left to turn to." Her words stunned Son. For a brief moment, he could only clench his fists, staring at the frail woman and the tiny child starving for milk, his chest heavy with emotion. He knew if he left them here, they wouldn't survive another day. Without hesitation, Son picked up the baby and helped Gwyn to her feet. His voice was firm and resolute. "Come on. I'll take you both to my home. It's safe there." Gwyn wanted to refuse, but she was too weak. Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded faintly in gratitude. When they arrived at his home, Son quickly cooked a bowl of hot porridge and took out some milk he had bought earlier for his sister's child to feed the baby. Watching the little one drink greedily, Gwyn's eyes blurred with tears. Perhaps for the first time in so long, she finally felt safe. Son prepared a small corner of the house for them and spoke gently. "Stay here for a few days and regain your strength. We'll figure out the rest later. Don't worry, I'll help you." In that moment, Gwyn could only lower her head and hold her baby tightly. For the first time after countless days of hardship, she felt the warmth of kindness in a world that had been so cruel to her. Back slowly approached, his footsteps firm but measured. His sharp gaze softened slightly as he looked at Gwyn, who was still clutching her baby with trembling hands. "Miss, what's your name?" he asked, his voice calm but steady. Gwyn hesitated, her lips trembling before she finally answered in a whisper. My name is Gwyn." Back nodded slightly, then exchanged a quick glance with Son. He crouched down so he wouldn't tower over her and spoke gently. "Gwyn, I've heard what happened. You've been through a lot, but for now you and your baby are safe here. No one is going to drive you away." Tears welled up in Gwyn's eyes. For so long, she had lived in fear and uncertainty, and now this stranger's words felt like the first ray of warmth in her frozen world. Back let out another quiet sigh and stood up, turning to Son. "We'll need to keep an eye on her condition. And we should report this to the authorities later. But first, let her rest." Gwyn hugged her baby tighter, her shoulders shaking. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe, if only for a moment, that maybe things could change. After hearing Son recount everything from finding Gwyn in the forest to seeing her and her baby exhausted and with nowhere else to turn, Back fell silent, deep in thought. He looked at the frail woman clutching her child tightly, her eyes red from fatigue, and a sharp pang struck his heart. Back was not a cold man. He understood well the suffering of those who had been crushed by life's hardships. Yet, with the disciplined mindset of a veteran police officer, he couldn't easily accept letting a stranger stay in their home. "Son, I understand you did this out of kindness," Bak spoke, his voice firm but not harsh. "But you can't keep her here forever. This is her home, not a shelter. I think the best thing we can do is give her some money, at least enough for her and the baby to find another place to stay." Son immediately protested. "Brother, she and the baby are far too weak right now. If we send them away, where would they go? At least, let them stay a few more days until they recover." Bak shook his head, his eyes unwavering. "No, son. You have to be realistic. We can't take in a stranger indefinitely. What if something happens?" Gwyn sat there in silence, her trembling hands clutching her baby tighter, as though terrified that someone might take away the only refuge she had found. She dared not speak, only bowing her head as silent tears rolled down her cheeks. Son turned to his brother, his voice strained. "Brother, at least look at the baby. It's innocent. It doesn't deserve this." The small room fell into a heavy silence. Bak clenched his fists, torn between his principles and his compassion. Finally, he let out a long sigh, though his gaze remained resolute. "Son, I've said what I needed to say. Tomorrow morning, I'll give her some money. And after that, she has to leave." Bak's words cut through the air like a knife, piercing Gwyn's heart. As for Son, though unwilling to accept it, he could only tighten his fists and stare down at the floor, helpless. Bak stared at Gwyn for a long moment before letting out a deep sigh. He pulled some money from his wallet, placed it in her hand, and spoke firmly. "Take this. I know your situation is difficult, but Son is still young, living alone, unmarried. If you and your child stay here too long, the neighbors will gossip. I don't want that to hurt my brother's reputation." Hearing this, Gwyn's hands trembled, her gaze dropping to the floor. She bit her lip until it bled, a wave of humiliation and sorrow choking her. All these years, she had grown used to cold, judgmental stares, but she never expected that even after being rescued, she still wouldn't have a place to stay for more than a few hours. "Thank you, but I can't take this," Gwyn whispered hoarsely. Holding her baby tightly, she slowly turned and walked toward the door, her feet heavy as though weighed down by stone. At the gate, the afternoon sun cast its harsh light over her gaunt face, mixing with sweat and tears until neither could be told apart. Then, suddenly, a voice called out from behind. "Gwyn!" Son came running after her, panting. In his hand was an old but clean hat. He gently placed it on Gwyn's head, then unexpectedly grabbed her hand and pressed some money into it. "Take it. Think of it as a loan. Pay me back when you can. My house is right here. If things get tough again, don't hesitate. Come find me." Gwyn froze. Her eyes welled with tears, her hands trembling as she clutched the money tightly. In that moment, she could only nod hard, unable to speak, as tears rolled down her thin, pale cheeks, soaking her hands. Son stood watching her, his heart heavy. He knew that from this moment on, the image of this fragile woman holding her child would stay with him forever, something he could never turn away from. After leaving Son's house, Gwyn carried her child along the dusty red road to a small shop near the market. She sold the bamboo shoots and lingji mushrooms she had gathered to the shop owner. With the little money she earned, plus the money Son had secretly slipped into her hand, Gwyn immediately bought some milk for her baby and a few cheap food items, just enough to quiet their gnawing hunger. That night, for the first time in days, Gwyn watched her child fall asleep without crying from hunger. But her brief moment of relief quickly faded, because as darkness fell, she was forced to face a harsh truth. She and her baby had nowhere to sleep. Holding her child close, Gwyn wandered through the narrow paths until she stumbled upon an old, abandoned hut in someone's field. It was nothing more than 4 makeshift walls without a door. Inside, a tattered hammock hung and used for who knew how long. With no other option, Gwyn stepped inside, spread out a few worn clothes, and gently lay down with her baby in her arms. In the cold of the forest night, she pressed her child against her chest, trying to shield the little one from the biting wind. But the next morning, just as the sunlight filtered through the leaves, the owner of the field suddenly appeared, a middle-aged woman with a stern face. The moment she saw Gwyn and the baby in the hut, she shouted, "This is my land. What are you doing here?" Startled, Gwyn quickly stood up, bowing her head in desperation. "I'm so sorry. I had nowhere else to go last night. Please, let us stay here for a few days. I'll pay you back when I have money." The woman crossed her arms, her expression cold. "No, this isn't a charity. If you want to stay, pay first. If not, leave right now." Choking back tears, Gwyn begged again, but the woman's heart did not soften. Not only did she refuse, but in anger, she threw Gwyn's few belongings out of the hut and shoved the mother and child away. Under the scorching sun, Gwyn clutched her baby tightly, tears streaming down her face. Once again, life had cast her out, leaving her homeless and lost, with no idea where to go next. Gwyn and her baby quietly picked up their few scattered belongings that had been thrown out. The infant in her arms cried until its voice was hoarse, the frail sound cutting deep into the heart of anyone who heard it. Holding her child tightly, Gwyn's tear-filled eyes blurred her path as each heavy step seemed to drag her deeper into her cruel fate. On the rough, uneven road, the small silhouettes of mother and child slowly disappeared into the fading glow of the setting sun. Homeless, with nowhere to go, their only strength came from the unyielding bond between a mother and her child. But would life show mercy to this unfortunate woman? Would Officer Sun, the man who once extended his hand to save them, arrive in time to change their fate once more? Stay tuned for the next episode, because this story has only just begun.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người câu chuyện tình yêu, không phải câu chuyện tình yêu, mình xin lỗi, ý là một câu chuyện mới về mẹ đơn thân Lý Tự Quỳnh. Thì câu chuyện này rất cảm động và ý nghĩa. Mình hy vọng rằng mọi người có thể theo dõi hết video. Và nếu như mà có mọi chi tiết thắc mắc thì mọi người có thể xem chi tiết video ở kênh Lý Tự Quỳnh. Lý Tự Quỳnh viết không dấu á mọi người. Và nếu như mà có mọi ý kiến đóng góp thì mọi người có thể để lại ở phần bình luận cho mình nha. Và rất hy vọng rằng có thể đón chờ được những bình luận của mọi người cũng như là những ủng hộ của mọi người trong những video tiếp theo. Cảm ơn mọi người vì đã theo dõi các video trên kênh mình và hy vọng rằng chúng ta sẽ gắn bó với nhau một quãng thời gian rất là dài, vì chúng ta còn rất là nhiều video sau này nữa.